Welcome to More Financial Talk. I am Ryan Moore, and with me today we've got co-host Tony Shore. How are you, Tony? Doing well? How was your vacation?
Yeah, I was out last week. I missed you last week. We normally record the show every single week, but I was in Palm Springs, California. It is if you have to go to California, go to Palm Springs because it is nice. They don't have the traffic there, and it's a beautiful place. It's surrounded by mountains. You're in the desert, but you're surrounded by mountains. So what could be better than that? I think it's great. It's a lot like Arizona and just awesome. We had a great time. Actually, they have an amazing zoo there called the Living Desert, and we got to actually touch a rhino, rub
Wow.
its side, and feed a rhino. The rhino experience. You can pay a little extra and get that. It was so much fun. We saw Joshua Tree National Park, had a great time. Well, how about you last week? Well, besides weeping openly because I was not there, how was your week?
Well, having that gap in my week where we didn't do the podcast allowed me to catch up on a few things. I don't know. It's just
Good.
constantly busy, but keeping business rolling, keeping people's accounts managed, and
Sure.
trying to service clients and keep happy clients. But it's all going very well. Very exciting things on the horizon with the company and just how things are going. And we've added some new staff and getting everybody trained up. So these are exciting times for RSG.
Yeah, it sounds like it. You guys have been busy. Normally, it kind of slows down in the summer, but you stay busy. I mean, really, you don't have a slow time of year, and I respect that. You love helping people out, and you've been keeping busy. That's good. As far as our show today, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about 401k mistakes, things
Ah,
that people do sometimes without realizing maybe what they're doing or not doing. So I run into this a lot and a lot of this stuff. So I do think this would be a great topic to hit some of the points on this to
sure.
help people be more mindful of what they're doing before they do it to make sure it's the right thing for them and not make any missteps that they can't essentially unwind.
Yeah, there you go. I think it's so important, and the majority of Americans have some type of a 401k or 403b or TSP, and so there are a lot of costly mistakes. I know you've seen people come in and they've made because they weren't working with a professional like yourself. And you want to avoid these costly mistakes. Obviously, one big costly mistake could derail somebody's retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. And for many outside of their home equity, this can be their largest, asset or resource,
Oh yeah,
whether it's for retirement or whatever. So therefore, this is something that shouldn't be ignored. And there's a lot of rules and a lot of moving parts here. So again, without having the right guidance and the professional support. Now, look, we're not 401k managers, but when I meet folks that are looking to do retirement planning, we talk about their 401ks, we look at how they're structured within their 401k, and then ultimately talk about, what is the best approach as far as leaving it in there, taking it out, what are your options, just trying to get the most out of the resource and make sure that their money is always working hard so that they can get the most out of retirement essentially.
yeah. I think a lot of people, pretty much everyone I know has a 401k or something similar, an employee sponsored retirement plan. And I think they think, I just, I put in the automatic 3% or whatever it is, or put in something and then I forget about it. But there are a lot of ins and outs to a 401k and a lot of mistakes that can be made, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing I would say is that most 401k or employer plans don't really provide a lot of resources in terms of professional guidance. There are some that, that will try to give you some resources in that regard, but most everybody I meet, they tend to be on their own with this and it's not their forte, right? It's not their career avenue in terms of financial planning. Otherwise they wouldn't be where they are. They'd be doing it on their own. So, running blind on this stuff is, I think, where some of the biggest issues, can unfold.
Yeah, I remember a job I got. It's been almost 20 years ago now, but I remember starting it with this big company, and when I signed up for my benefits, This is, 20 years ago, I was like, that's when I really was starting to pay attention to retirement accounts and say, okay, it's important I save. I remember we had three, I think it was four levels. It's like low risk, medium low, medium high, and high. You checked one.
Sure.
You checked one of those four boxes. That was as in depth as it got. That was,
Yeah.
and they didn't offer any advice or help. You just checked one of those boxes, and that was it.
Sure. Well, let's touch on that real quick, because that was one of the bullet points I wanted to touch on was, risk tolerance as it relates to your 401k selections.
Sure.
Okay. So here's the tendency is, people that are hardworking and they want to save for their future. They're kind of have their head down. They're working hard. They've set their contributions in terms of what percentage of their paycheck is going into their 401k. And they just, like you kind of said, set it and forget it. And as the money grows and you get some good years in the market, well, ultimately, if you're choosing growth funds that are filled with equities, the more the equities grow, the more equities you have. So what could start out as a proper risk tolerance, allocation or model for what they're picking in their selections, could end up basically growing right out of their risk tolerance if they don't have the foresight to basically rebalance and bring that growth back in line and shuffle the deck to make sure that you're keeping your risk tolerance in line for your comfort level. So what's a very typical thing for me is when I meet folks for the first time and we are ultimately going through our planning process and we do an assessment, kind of looking under the hood at their existing holdings. So this is typically after they've already done a risk analysis survey with us to develop a profile as an investor. Well, what I'm here to say is that a lot of times what's in their investments is telling us one thing, but the results of their risk survey is telling us something completely different. So why is that? Again, it's because as they build in their 401k, they're not typically rebalancing and they start to grow right out of their own comfort level. And that can make you more susceptible to bigger swings to the downside when markets are not cooperating and going through a corrective period. So I think it's important to be mindful of what your risk tolerance is and to watch your accounts, at least check it on an annual basis to potentially do that rebalancing. And while we're at it, I'll just say that, we have a resource. It's called the Color of Money Risk Analysis Survey. And what it is you answer 11 multiple choice questions, and then it generates a score. And the score is on a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being the most aggressive, 1 being the most conservative. So if somebody comes in with a score of a 60, that would be slightly into a moderate growth category. And what that's suggesting is that 60% of their assets should be allocated to growth investments, and therefore the other 40% should be allocated to safer investments like bonds, for example. So we offer this service to do this survey complimentary. You would go to our homepage, and there's a bubble on our homepage that says risk survey. So you essentially just click that and it takes you right to the system. You answer the 11 questions and it will give you that score. So what that's doing is basically developing a profile, and it really is only about a 5 or 10 minute process to complete that. So that's definitely one thing to consider, making sure that you're keeping within your comfort level as you continue to contribute and grow your 401k.
Yeah, there you go. And I think that's very important to understand the risk assessment you do. It's so important. And I know that's part of the no charge, no obligation consultation that you offer people. You run that Color of Money risk analysis to see where they're at and talk about, okay, based on your timeline, you look at then where their 401k or their other assets are allocated and say, you're really not allocated the way you want to be or for your own personal risk tolerance. And so you make adjustments. That's good.
Absolutely. Yeah. So with that, let's talk about the contributions and matching that aspect of 401ks. Okay. Because I think there's can be a mistake in this regard as well.
Oh, sure.
And I think most of the people that I meet, they're trying to contribute as much as they can within the budget, trying to plan for the future. But I think it's critically important to know if you need to know what they're matching. So what a match is the company and through the 401k, they're basically giving you, um, free money. They're matching part of your contribution. And part of that is to provide attractive enough benefits that create kind of a loyalty to the company where, it's an incentive to stay on with them. But I think the mistake that's made is to not contribute at least up to the match. Most matches are going to be probably 3 to 5%. Therefore, we're not talking about needing to overly contribute. I don't think from a ratio of your paycheck, but let's say they're contributing, or excuse me, matching 5%. So if you're not contributing at least 5%, then you're leaving free money on the table. So what we always say is at least contribute up to the match. Don't leave that free money on the table. And you would think that that's an obvious, direction or approach to this, but I will just say literally yesterday afternoon, I was doing a review for some clients, and they're still working and they have a 401k, and the husband, we were looking at their 401k together, and they were contributing 2% less than the match. And so I pointed out to them that, hey, you're leaving this free money on the table. And so I helped navigate them through their online system with their 401k to increase the contribution so they stop, leaving that free money. So you want to get all that free money you can.
Yeah, it's stupid to leave free money on the table, and that is a huge mistake that a lot of people make. I made that when I first started. I wish I knew then what I know now when I was in my 20s and got that first full-time job. Man, you want to put in at least enough to get the full match. Otherwise, it's crazy. You're just your company, it's part of your it's really part of your compensation package. It's like telling your company, I know you're willing to pay me this, but I want $2,000 a year less, right?
Yeah, right.
That's what you're saying. That's what you're doing by not taking advantage of the full match. You have to do that. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of not putting in enough. I know you mentioned a lot of people you meet with, obviously they're putting in as much as they can, but not everybody is. And but what about putting in more than the match? Sometimes that doesn't make sense for some people, depending on where they're at in their time horizon, right? That's a mistake people make. They put everything into one account, and maybe they're maxing out a 401k, which can be good. But like you said, maybe they could have more control and be more diverse by investing elsewhere, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's when you can start looking at tax planning as it relates to this too. And I know we've talked about this in previous episodes, and we'll continue to talk about it, which is, do you want to pay taxes on the seed, or do you want to pay taxes on the harvest, right? And every dollar that goes into the pre-tax traditional 401k or 403b is partnering with the IRS, which puts you in a position to have to pay taxes on the harvest down the road. So with that, one of our philosophies is, if you can't contribute to Roth through your 401k, and we'll touch on that in a minute, then the message is contribute up to the match, no more, and then move on to the next best thing, which might be contribute up to the match and then add some other contributions to retirement through a self-directed Roth, if you qualify and don't make too much income. So there's a lot of rules and parameters to all this. I try to encourage people, if it's within your resources, if you make enough income, you should try to max out your 401k. If you're under 50 this year, you can contribute 23,500. If you're over 50, you can contribute 31,000. There's also an additional catch up this year. It's just came about for the first time. If you're between age 60 and 63, you can actually contribute $34,750 as the max. So that's a way to really get some good savings going. And if you do it by way of tax-free Roth, now you're really getting somewhere, because you're building a tax-free bucket of money. And that's another thing. So a lot of folks don't realize that your 401k or employer plan typically does offer a Roth ability. So Roth contributions. And they don't really advertise that. I was reading an article not too long ago that 82% of employer plans offer a Roth 401k. Now, let's make sure we're clear on something here. And again, there's a lot to go into this, so definitely consult your financial professional. But if you contribute to the pre-tax traditional 401k side or employer plan, you're getting a tax deduction. So if you make 100,000, you contribute 10, you're taxed on 90,000 of income. And that's why that 10,000 goes in pre-tax, because you're getting the deduction. If you contribute to a Roth 401k, it's going in after tax. So if you make 100,000, you contribute 10,000 to the Roth 401k. Well, you're getting taxed on 100,000 income, meaning you're not getting that deduction. But in my opinion, for many, getting hung up on the deduction today can be nearsighted to the bigger benefit down the road. I kind of say you don't want to trip over nickels and dimes to get to the real money. However, be mindful that if you're somebody that needs that deduction because you're teetering on the next tax bracket, then that involves some different planning, and maybe you shouldn't contribute to the Roth. And that's where I say consult with your tax professional or financial professional to really analyze that a little closer. And that's part of what we do for folks when we're working with them one-on-one, is really drilling down on all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the tax implications of your 401ks and your retirement accounts, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is huge. I mean, taxes in retirement are going to be one of the biggest expenses, if not the biggest, retirees will face. So you have to plan for that. And again, like you said, have a team. And I know you have a great team there, Ryan, set up for people, and you work with your clients to make sure that tax planning is part of their overall financial plan and retirement income plan. So that's good, but it starts with your 401k and with your retirement accounts while you're working. So make sure you do the match. Make sure you take into consideration where your money is at. What's the next aspect of this you think we need to know about?
Well, what happens if you leave your job? Okay, so let's say you're not ready to retire and you either go find a new job or you get terminated, whatever the case may be. And, you know, your parents' generation, Tony, or maybe your grandparents, I honestly don't know how old you are, but the older generation, they operated different. They tended to work for the same job their whole
Yeah.
career, lived in the same house.
Yeah, my parents did that, and their parents did that.
Yeah, there you go. But our generation, or even the baby boomer generation, they tend to bounce around jobs a bit more. And so
Sure.
therefore, when you accumulate at one job and you have a separation of service, so you can't typically roll your money out of your 401k until you get to 59 and a half, or you have a separation of service. So what I also run into a lot is people will leave their job and they had a 401k at that company. And when they leave their 401k money there. See, I have a thought on that, which is, look, if you're going to leave, don't you think your money should go with you?
Yeah,
Because
if you're not working there, why your money shouldn't be either, right?
Sure, because they could change the plan. They could have a new plan manager, money manager. The fees could change. The investment options could change. And if you're not there to really keep track of it or know what's happening, I just think you're making yourself susceptible. But I think there's even a bigger thing to consider here, which is a separation of service allows you to unlock that money out of the 401k and move it out of there, which is, in my opinion, a good thing. So the one question that people always ask, well, won't that be a taxable event? And if you do it the right way, it won't be. We're not talking about taking a distribution to get that 401k money out of there. It's called a 401k rollover. So essentially, if it is pre-tax, then when you have a separation of service, you go establish an IRA account and you do a 401k rollover to the IRA. So 401k is an employer plan. An IRA, by definition, is an individual retirement account, but they both can be pre-tax. So essentially, it's going pre-tax to pre-tax. But what's the real benefit? The real benefit is you're unlocking that money where in the 401ks. Now, all 401ks in these employer plans, quite honestly, give you nothing but a limited menu of antiquated mutual funds to choose from. They tend to be higher costing and expenses in the internal expenses, where you learn about that in your prospectus, but nobody reads the prospectus. So that's where you see the high fees that can be within some of these mutual funds. And then because of the types of mutual funds, they do historically tend to underperform their measuring benchmarks. So you're limited on your options. They're antiquated options. So if you can unlock that money into an IRA, now you've just opened up the full menu of what's out there in the marketplace to invest in. It also allows you to take that money and go work with a financial professional. And that's where you can also start to do tax planning like Roth conversions and things of that nature, where you can't do that typically inside the 401k. So it's always my recommendation, as soon as you can get the money out, do it. Now there's another part to this, but let me pause and see if that created any thoughts for you.
Well, yeah, it does. I think it's really important for people to understand that. And I think, especially I made that mistake actually. I had, I left a job because I didn't leave the job. This is the problem. It got bought out by another company. I worked there 5 years, been contributing to the 401k, been getting the match, and then it got bought out. It was a small company, got bought out by a big company, kept doing the same thing I was doing. They had me fill out some forms for benefits, didn't think anything of it. But I never switched my 401k over or filled out a form to do that because I wasn't aware of that, or I missed that form. And so then I worked another 5 years, contributed, and then when I left that company to go to another company after another 5 years, I just thought my 401k had been building that whole time and everything was fine. Well, I got the amount. I wanted to transfer my 401k to my new job, which we're talking about why it's so important to understand why it's important to do that and not leave it, you mentioned. But what happened was I'm looking at the amount going, this isn't right. It should be at least twice this. Well, it turns out that 401k was with that old job. Well, that owner and that company that we were with, long gone. I had to dig for a statement because it was a separate company and I didn't realize it. So I lost track of that for a while, but I found it again.
That's
But
good.
again, it was just sitting dormant. I wasn't putting money in. You're not dollar cost averaging. You're missing out on a lot if you don't keep track of this. And you really don't want a bunch of 401ks sitting out there, do you?
No, I don't think so. And you brought up another good point that I want to touch on, which is another mistake I think people can make, is when they can roll the money. So let's say you're with a 401k or with a company with a 401k and you leave the job, right? And you have the wherewithal to take the 401k money with you, but now you're in a new job that offers a new 401k. And one option is you can take the old 401k and roll it into the new 401k. But I think that's a big mistake, because what are you doing? You're just locking the money back up and you
Yes,
can't
you
get it
are.
out. And now you're limited options, antiquated options. I have an example where I had a couple that came through my retirement planning workshop, and we focused a lot on tax planning and how to convert from pre-tax to tax-free, and you have to pay the taxes, but you can't do that inside a 401k. So this couple came in to meet with me. We had a strategy session, and he had left a job that he had about a $400,000 401k, started a new job, and then rolled it all into the new 401k. So he was in his 50s. So when I met him, there was nothing I could do to help him at that point. If that money didn't get put into the new 401k and it was in an IRA, then we would be able to start doing tax planning. I'd be able to work with him, provide a lot more strategic options than what he would have in the 401k. But he made a misstep and he locked the money back up, and there was nothing we could do. And so he's got to now wait till 59 and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's another thing. You mentioned the 59 and a half. A lot of times you don't want to lock money up. You're right. And I think it is a mistake when the mistakes that people make when they leave a job, I think you covered it, but transferring their 401k into their new 401k, if they leave one job and go to another, that might be a big mistake, as you just illustrated. Leaving it at the old company is a mistake. You talked about that. Cashing it out is a huge mistake, right? I mean, because then you're going to have to pay taxes and penalties on it.
Yeah.
So you
So
don't want to do that either.
correct. So there are a lot of rules that go into all these retirement plans. And I know we're not going to have time to cover all that, but if you take money out by way of distribution before 59 and a half, if it's the pre-tax traditional 401k, then A, it's going to get taxed, but B, now you're paying an early withdrawal penalty of 10%. Now, there are some exemptions where you could get the money out for hardship situations or first-time home buyer exemption. And again, probably not going to take time to go through all those details, but there are some exemptions where you can get money out without having to pay that penalty, but you're typically always going to have to pay the tax if it's never been taxed. But let me touch on the 59 and a half a little bit further. So
Sure.
when we meet folks, and I just met with a fellow earlier today, and they came on board with us as clients towards the end of last year. And at that time, they had a couple little accounts, $20,000 each, that we were able to establish a relationship with and get them on board with our organization. But the bulk of their nest egg was in the husband's 401k. And when we met them, he was, about 59 or a little just under 59. So basically the plan was once he got to 59 and a half, we were going to roll the money over, and that was going to be able to bring the money over to our management. All of our active management strategies, much better than passive antiquated mutual funds. And then we'd be able to start doing Roth conversions. So what I want people to know, though, is if you get to 59 and a half and you roll the money out of the 401k, it's not a taxable event. We talked about that, but also it doesn't mean that you're done contributing. So just because you sweep the account out to get you some better, strategies and more, better management per se, you can still continue to make your contributions. So if you're working to 65, you sweep the money out at 59 and a half. You continue as you have been making contributions into the 401k. So we do this all the time with folks. And then maybe after a year, you've built up another good chunk of money in there. We'll go back and do another rollover, sweep that out and do it again the next year. So just because you roll the money out at 59 and a half doesn't mean you're done contributing. So a lot of people think that that's the effect of doing that, and it's not. So it's important to know, why one would do that and why it doesn't handicap you for future contributions if you're still working.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. And that's a really, really good point you make there. And I think it's so important. A lot of people don't understand how critical that 59 and a half rule is and how expensive it will be. A lot of people think I've got a 401k. If it's a traditional 401k, I've got $100,000 in there. I'm going to take that $100,000 out. I need $100,000, or I've got $100,000 for retirement. You don't. It's a joint account with Uncle Sam. And unfortunately, I don't even think he's my real uncle. But if you got $100,000, 30 of that, or 25 or 30 of that is probably going to go directly to the government, at least 20%. And then on top of it, another 10% if you're not 60 years old yet. And that money, though, a big mistake people make is they have to get into the mindset that money is for retirement. It is for retirement. That's all that's supposed to be used for, right?
Yeah. And if you're not factoring in your partner in these accounts, I think that's a big mistake. So when I'm educating, I'll say this a little anecdotally, but when you get your $1 million 401k statement and you're thinking, wow, we're getting there, we got enough to consider, we're getting close to retirement here. I ask them, well, are you doing the mental math? Are you factoring in your partner in that account? Because is that $1 million all yours if it's in the pre-tax traditional side? And the answer is no. And, people start, looking like they're stunned because they haven't been doing the mental math, right?
Right.
And so I strongly encourage people to consider contributing to the Roth side, but just know that it's not going to give you the tax breaks now, but it's going to allow that money to go grow tax-free, forever until you take it out. So pay the taxes on the seed instead of the harvest, and bite the bullet now to better position yourself later. But be smart about it. Make sure you're getting guided properly through the right help, whether it's your tax professional or financial professional. So one last point I'd like to make to all this, Tony.
Okay.
So the benefit in unlocking the money at 59 and a half with what we do is, again, we work with active money managers, a boutique firm that's national that manages over $7 billion that are giving us access to CFAs, which are, portfolio managers of the highest level that are regularly on national TV. So instead of just rolling it out to go buy a bunch of mutual funds, people that roll their money over to us, we're providing unique active management strategies that tend to perform better over time and allow us to do more risk mitigation and get off the roller coaster, right? Instead of just riding that roller coaster with passive investments, we want to provide next level active management that is going to bring specialization and customization to building an actual plan. So we're not here to just pitch product or throw people in some cookie cutter, model.
Right.
We want to be very strategic and specific, and getting that money out of that 401k with those antiquated mutual funds as soon as possible will give them more access to more, cutting edge strategies.
Yep, there you go. And that's huge. I mean, you're able to pick up the phone and talk to the president of the investment firm and the money manager, the project and money managers, the portfolio managers, I should say, that are managing these accounts, and they're actively managed. And you can specifically ask them questions regarding each client's specific needs. So as a client of yours, I can just say, Ryan, I want to do this and this. And you can say, hey, let's get the portfolio manager on the phone and ask them what's happening. That's huge.
That was a huge value add. I kind of say it like this. So imagine looking at your statements, picking a mutual fund, whether it's a Fidelity, a Vanguard, and you saw something on the news the night before that disturbed you. So you call your advisor, you call your 401k administrator and say, hey, I would like to get on the phone with that fund manager because I've got some questions.
Right.
How far are you going to get with that? Okay. I'm here to tell you it ain't going to happen. Right. So the benefit with working with Gradient Investments, which is a team of CFAs, which is the same credentials as any, mutual fund manager. And that's why these folks are regularly invited on national TV. They don't pay to go on. They're invited on because of their intellectual capital. And one of the benefits in working with Gradient is we have direct access to these people that are pushing the buttons and pulling the levers. So if I do have a client that's up at night because they were disturbed by something they thought of or saw on the news, within a 24 to 48 hour period, we can have one of these CFAs on the phone or on a Zoom type call. Yep. We could fire the questions right at them. And so I think that's absolutely huge. And one of the big reasons why I like working and love working with that group.
Yeah, it's a huge resource and an amazing help and resource and tool for your clients to utilize. So to summarize, there are a lot of 401k mistakes that can be made with your retirement accounts, especially your employer-sponsored accounts, whether it's a 401k or 403b. And, you touched on a lot of them: withdrawing money before 59 and a half, having too many 401ks at different places, not, leaving your 401k or transferring it. And then there's the mistakes that can be made with rollovers, direct, indirect. You can't make any of these moves with a 401k without working with a trusted financial professional. If you do, you outlined a lot of costly mistakes that could derail a retirement. So to make sure people are working with a trusted financial services professional, a fiduciary is going to look out for their best interests. How can our listeners, Ryan, get a hold of you to set up that no charge, no obligation consultation to get a plan in place, or to go over some of these things with you to see where they're at, what their risk tolerance is, and what their money is doing for them? Make sure it's in the right place.
Absolutely. So you could contact us directly at area code 615-467-6300. You can also check out our website at rsgtn.com or send an email to info@rsgtn. info@rsgtn.com. Yeah. So
there you go.
All right. Well, good deal, Tony. Appreciate you, sir.
Yeah, appreciate you. A great show today, Ryan. And listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of More Financial Talk with our host, Ryan Moore.